Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to our 10-year birthday party. We are very excited to see you all. Thank you so much for coming to join us this afternoon. Just a bit of housekeeping from me. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if the fire alarm goes off, please go back down to reception and the fire areas outside. If you have any assistance needs throughout the afternoon, please go back to the School of Music reception downstairs where you came in. And the toilets are located in the stairwell where you just came up. Please, can you put your mobile phones on silent during the afternoon, just for the comfort of everybody else. Just to quickly take you through our schedule for this afternoon, so we have a welcome from our Vice-Chancellor and then a keynote from our Director, Piers Forster. We then have an exciting panel discussion chaired by our Priestley Chair, Jason Lowe from the Met Office. We then have our amazing prize winners and our annual Peer Sellers Prize as well. And then after that, there'll be opportunity for networking. We've got refreshments, canapes, cupcakes, and you have a chance to see the exhibitions outside. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to our Vice-Chancellor and President, Professor Shearer West.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, I'm the Vice-Chancellor, Shearer West, and it's a real pleasure to welcome all of you here to this very special occasion, the 10th anniversary of the Priestley Centre for Climate Futures. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, whether you are long-standing partners, colleagues, students, alumni, or friends. Your presence reflects the vibrant and committed community that has formed around this important work. Today's event is both a celebration and a moment of reflection, a milestone that allows us to look back with pride on what has been achieved over the past decade, and to look ahead with determination to the challenges and opportunities that lie before us. When the Priestley Centre was founded 10 years ago, it was built on a powerful and ambitious idea that tackling climate change requires bringing together different disciplines, perspectives, and forms of expertise. Climate change is not just a scientific issue. It's economic, social, political, cultural, and ethical. From its very beginning, the Centre set out to bridge those divides, creating a space where scientists, engineers, social scientists, policymakers, artists, and others could come together to address one of the defining challenges of our age. It's fitting that the Centre bears the name of Joseph Priestley, the inspirational Yorkshire scientist whose curiosity and commitment to discovery helped shape modern science. In the 1770s, he observed, "In completing one discovery, we never fail to get an imperfect knowledge of others of which we could have no idea before." This insight captures something essential about the work of the Priestley Centre, that knowledge is always evolving and that progress depends on continually bringing new perspectives together. The Centre has grown into an internationally recognized leader in interdisciplinary climate research. Its work has helped shape global conversations, inform policy at the highest levels, and deliver practical solutions for communities and decision makers. The Centre's impact can be seen not only in academic publications, but in real-world outcomes, influencing policy, shaping practice, and accelerating meaningful climate action. Just as importantly, the Centre was built on a rich network of collaborations and partnerships. These span local communities here in Leeds, across the UK, and around the world. And these relationships have been critical in ensuring that research is grounded in reality, responsive to need, and capable of making a tangible difference. And of course, the Priestley Centre has also played a vital role in educating and inspiring the next generation of climate leaders, and I'm sure there are many of you here in the room today, equipping students and early career researchers with the knowledge, skills, and confidence to carry this work forward. That legacy may well be one of its most enduring contributions. At the University of Leeds, we remain deeply committed to addressing climate change and to embedding sustainability across everything that we do. And this commitment is reflected in our university strategy and our climate plan, which is at the heart of the part we're playing to support climate change mitigation and adaptation, and continuing to contribute to a healthier, greener, and fairer place to live, work, and study. The Priestley Centre has been central to delivering on that ambition. Its work exemplifies the kind of interdisciplinary, collaborative, and impactful research that defines our university's approach. As we celebrate this anniversary, we also reaffirm the importance of the Centre within our strategic priorities and our continued support for its future. It's now my great pleasure to introduce someone who's been instrumental in shaping the Centre's success. Professor Piers Forster, Director of the Priestley Centre for Climate Futures. Piers is a world-leading climate scientist whose work has had profound influence on our understanding of climate change and its implications. We are also especially proud to recognize his most recent honors, and there's more than one, his appointment as Commander of the Order of the British Empire and his election as a Fellow of the Royal Society. These are outstanding achievements and richly deserved. It's fitting, too, that the director of the Priestley Centre should join the ranks of the Royal Society, as Joseph Priestley himself was a Fellow of the Royal Society. So that connection serves as a powerful reminder of the enduring spirit of scientific inquiry, curiosity, and public engagement that underpins everything we do here. So today, as we celebrate 10 years of achievement, collaboration, and impact, we also look forward to the next decade of innovation, partnership, and leadership in tackling climate change. So please join me in congratulating the Priestley Centre on this remarkable milestone and in welcoming Professor Piers Forster to deliver this afternoon's keynote address. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Sarah. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here, and thanks for that introduction, but I want to thank everyone, most of all, for coming to our birthday. So thank you for turning up. You probably go to tons of children's birthday kind of parties, and this will be exactly the same. We're going to have a little dance, and then we're going to go outside for fun. But what I want to do today, I first want to really briefly reflect on where we've come from, but I want to spend most of today to talk about what we want to do over the next 10 years. And I think we're going to have a really exciting discussion together, and we'll hopefully collectively decide what we want to do. So it will be fun. So this goes back to 2015 for when the Paris Agreement was being negotiated, and I got a telephone call when we still had telephones from a negotiator working for Trinidad and Tobago, and they were so excited. They said to me, we're probably going to agree on a 1.5 degree target, and that might save my country, So they were really optimistic, and that sort of optimistic excitement did feed into me as well. And that was where the whole Priestley Centre really kind of began. But it also began in a challenge to us as scientists, because we as scientists weren't really working on 1.5 degrees at all. So in fact, there was a big divide between what the policymakers were working on and what we were working on as a community. So the whole idea was to try and get that connection much better and closer together than where it was before. So under the guidance of our VC at the time, Sir Alan Langlands, which has one big honour than both myself and Shearer, so good job, you've obviously done something even better. We were able to appoint some exciting new academics to really begin our journey. And this is a picture of myself and James Ford, one of them at the negotiations of the IPCC special report on 1.5 degrees. These were negotiations in Korea. And this report on 1.5 degrees did really provide the evidence to policymakers about what they had to do. And it was a straightforward job. At that same time, I got appointed to the Climate Change Committee, and with the Chief Executive, Chris, who is on the panel today, under your leadership, we had this ridiculous conversation about why don't we set our country a net zero target? And we said, no, we can't do that. Yeah, we can, let's do it. So we sort of produced a report and then convinced the Theresa May government to accept it. And then, equally surprisingly, nearly every country in the world copied us. So we sort of thought the job is easy, but so that was 2019. But it's good to reflect to see if that really did achieve what it wanted to do and did it really work. So this shows some other work we're doing to try and track this diagram to track indicators of climate change, and they tracked them over since 2019, since the publication of that IPCC report. And what I want to get from this is, very unfortunately, they're all going in the wrong direction. So on this side, we have the greenhouse gas emissions, and on this side up here, we do have the temperature extreme we're all experiencing. And it's even worse than that, in fact. They're all going in the wrong direction, and they are right at the top of our projections. So things are getting worse quicker than we expect them to be getting worse. So perhaps Paris Agreement didn't really work. But I think that is too kind of naive. But just because if you look at the left-hand side of the diagram, the greenhouse gas emission rise is not as big as it was. It began to slow down. So for mathematicians amongst you, if you look at the third derivative, that changed sign. So about some progress. But I think real progress is occurring. We see people installing solar panels in Pakistan, and I did hear last week that Santiago now has 6,500 electric buses. So things have really changed. And if we look at what this has done, if you look at the projection for the end of century temperature change before in 2015 and compare them today, we have probably, by the combination of policy and technology, it's difficult to separate, but we probably avoided about 1 degree of temperature change. So things have worked potentially. But this is part 2 of my talk now. But let's go back 10 years once more now, and even before, to this picture. This, I could have selected a lot of pictures for this part of my talk. I could have selected a tech bro, I could have selected Donald Trump, I could have selected riots in Belfast, the Strait of Hormuz, I could have selected deep inequality, but I took this back to the 2012 Olympics, and this was probably at the peak of kind of multilateralism and political correctness in some way, and perhaps we, as the academic community, didn't really see what was kind of coming, and the other reason why I did choose this picture is that these guys, they're not super intelligent, okay? They don't have a clue what they're doing. What we see with the big inequality and the big misinformation in the world, what I think personally is that this is a kind of phenomenal consequence of the system we find ourselves in. So we have to think about what we can do to change the system and do things differently. And this gets to the solution part of my talk. And again, I'll ask my colleague, what amount of time do I have left still, someone? Okay, I'll go speed up a bit. So we've done lots of great work on innovation, which we'll be delighted to talk to you about afterwards. But I sort of want to talk about a different type of innovation today. And I think I like this quote by William Gibson, one of my favorite authors, and his quoted, "The future has already arrived, but it's just not equally distributed." So there's a lot we can do with what we have today. So that's what I want to talk about, and what I think we as a community can contribute to it. So the first thing is get back to what we do best at, which is really critical thinking. And these are just some of my examples from across our community. And what I mean by this is really critical thinking for the problems of tomorrow. And I think while everybody is jumping on the artificial intelligence bandwagon, we have to think about what is it we are forgetting to do. So I particularly like this publication by Kavi Dimsky and Leslie Valencia that talk about the poly-crisis and what we can learn from 100 years of poly-crisis in Latin America. But I think that what we can do really best as an institution, we can really challenge ourselves to think outside the box and do good work. The next thing is, and this is the closing one to what I want to do personally, is to think about models of governance that, whether it's for our institution to decarbonize and become more resilient, or whether it's for a particular country. And we have Suraj Desai that sits on the European Scientific Advisory Council. We do a lot of work with the councils, but these councils are only as good as the governance in which they work. So you have to have long-term climate laws which are agile and which can change, and crucially is our chief financial officer in the audience, and also a great kind of panelist from the Bank of England, is that they have to be closely coupled to finance. You have to use the long-term governance to really drive that financial investment opportunities. And this just shows you an example of it really working in this country, whereas since the climate change Act was done, the rate of decarbonisation has doubled. So it can really work over the longer term. And to not much fanfare at all last Wednesday, we set the limit of the 7th carbon budget in the country, which sets an 87% reduction target by 2040. And we probably will get quite close to delivering that. The last thing I think we can really do well is think about our partnerships and our collaborations. We have an unprecedented international network of collaborators. And when our multilateral institutions are collapsing, I think this is when we want to support them, and we can support them, and we can challenge populism and disinformation by really partnering with education organisations and just really embedding ourselves within communities internationally to be their trusted partner. We can learn from them, and they can learn from us effectively to really change the world together. So what I think is that we are a great institution, but I kind of don't want to always talk about Leeds. I kind of think we have to partner effectively. We have to be humble about what we do well and what others do well. And we just have to be better at sharing. So I think if we do share effectively and we really do collaborate, we have the power to change the world together. We certainly don't have to go to Mars. Sorry, I forgot I did stammer on my kind of punchline then. We don't need to go to Mars. Okay, with that, I'd like to open it up to our panel. For introducing the chair of the panel up, and our Priestley chair, Professor Jason Lowe, Toby. We're all talking about our kind of comms today. Do you want to all come up, panel? I'll give you a cup, Jason.
So if the rest of the panel could join me. We've got a fantastic panel today. We were meeting in the green room in the back, and we were talking through issues like war, like famine, and we resolved when we came out here, we were going to focus very much on what is that message of hope we can bring, and so we'll build towards trying to get to that point. I'm going to take advantage of having such a good group, so I've got some questions to start. But there will be questions that hopefully come from you. So start to think what you'd like to ask this good group of people. Starting at this end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everybody, except Piers, because you've had your say.
Too much.
But I'm going to ask everybody else to maybe have 2 minutes to really say what you do and what's brought you here. So first up, we've got Libby Peake from the Climate Alliance. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I'm Libby Peake. I'm a senior fellow and head of resource policy at Green Alliance, which is a charity and a think tank that operates in the space of policy and politics, really trying to get the people who are in power to make the right decisions by the environment. And I was reflecting on my way up here that I'm kind of here to represent the think tank sector, which is a slightly uncomfortable place for me to be, because in terms of creating a positive climate future, you obviously have good think tanks like Green Alliance, but there's also more nefarious actors out there who, instead of engaging in evidence-based policy making, invest and promote policy-based evidence-making, and I'm thinking in particular of some egregious recent examples like the Institute of Economics Affairs and their rather absurd claims about the cost of reaching net zero. And I think that we need to kind of think about that, because that gets picked up by the press and it gets picked up by some politicians. And so there's a real fracturing at the moment of a lot of the consensus that we've seen. And so what I think that means is not that we need to turn away from the evidence-based policy making, but we need to rethink what we're doing and how we approach that evidence. And I was really in agreement with a lot of the things that Piers was saying there, in terms of rethinking the types of evidence we make, how we talk about the evidence and who we partner with. And at Green Alliance, we've long recognised the merits of coalitions, including a Greener UK coalition that was the post-Brexit environment sector's response to Brexit that secured the Environment Act. We do have partnerships with businesses, including on the Circular Economy Task Force, which sometimes makes progress, but not as much as I'd like. And we've done all of those things, but I think the sort of fracturing of the consensus on net zero just at the time when climate change is really starting to bite at this country is a real worry. And so I think we need to do more in terms of coalition buildings and creating those unusual partnerships to talk to those who are more affected in the communities and bring their voice to the table, to pursue unusual partnerships with people like health and social justice campaigners, and to create the better narratives that will recreate that consensus on tackling climate change and how to get there.
Brilliant. Next up, we've got Chris Stark, currently head of the UK's Clean Power Mission, previously Chief Executive of the Climate Change Committee. Chris, what's brought you here?
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for having me. So yeah, I've been working on climate or energy policy now for, I was trying to count it up when I was sitting there, I think probably more than 15 years now. But my career has been spent in government. I'm quite an unusual official in the sense that I came down from Scotland to work in London, and I was a statistician at the start of my career, and found myself working in the Treasury on in what we call a policy job. So the first part of my career, I didn't work on these issues at all. And then I returned to Scotland and briefly ran what's called the strategy unit in the Scottish Government, where I worked for the First Minister, who was then Alex Salmond. Now, Alex Salmond was an energy economist, and he took me aside one evening and said, "I'm really not that interested in your strategic advice, son. However, if you'd like to do a job that's interesting to me, go and run the energy team." So I went off to do that and just found something I absolutely loved. So since then I've worked on energy policy, climate policy, probably in that order, but with this outlook that's born of me having been trained essentially in the Treasury. So my outlook on all of this is not really one of an environmentalist at all. It's about thinking about how the whole economy transition takes place. And then that job in Scotland, what I was doing for the first time was what we now call carbon budgeting. So Scotland had its own Climate Change Act, and I worked out a way to wrestle the decisions and what to do about that trajectory that we need to go on around the Scottish Cabinet table, and then moved to do that for the UK at the Climate Change Committee with Piers. And Piers was very kind to me earlier, but I led that team, but the whole team did the work on increasing the country's ambition to what became a net zero target. So I suppose you could say that my career since then has been about not the target, but how it's delivered. And I did just an amazing time doing that job for 6 or 7 years, and then left government and did another job briefly when Ed Miliband asked me if I would come into government to do what I do now, which is to lead the very, very ambitious mission, as we call it, towards a cleaner energy system, which I've been doing for 2 years. So the reason I'm here is probably that. So it's worth saying the reason I took that job was because I'd spent too long essentially on the outside of the discussion of how things are delivered. I wanted to come in to show that government could get things done quickly. And whilst I think we have done that in the past 2 years and have definitely been pushing towards the kind of future that we want to see in this country in terms of reduced emissions, what I have learned over those 2 years is about how completely difficult it is to do anything at all from the centre of government, and the very, very polarised and divided discussion that has grown up around this whole debate, actually, and not just in the last 2 years, but particularly in the last 2 years. So I suppose I'm here today to try and represent my own experience of that over the last couple of years, and I definitely think there are some lessons about what we need to do over the next 10 years.
Great, thanks, Chris. Next up, David Wilkinson. I need to look at your job title. So I've been working with David for several years now. And I can guarantee, when I have a conversation with David, he'll always ask a question which he'll dress up as a simple question, and it'll be the most fiendishly difficult question. And you'll think it's about finance, but it will be about finance, but it will actually be about how the world works. So I'm really curious, David, what you're going to have to say. I'm just going to get it right this time. So you're the climate lead for the Supervisory Risk Directorate at the Bank of England. And I know you have to get the title exactly right.
Thanks, Jason. I would imagine that title doesn't mean a lot to people, so I think I'll start with what I do. Climate lead for the Risk Specialist Directorate at the Bank of England. My primary job is to review the risk management capabilities in relation to climate change of the largest banks and insurers in the country. And then linked with that, I'm a policy advisor for Bank of England policy. So I was the technical architect of the latest Bank of England policy that determines our expectations of banks and insurers' climate capabilities, strategy and risk management. And perhaps the third sort of part of the job is to advise on capital policy, which determines how much capital banks and insurers have to hold in relation to certain risks. So why is all that relevant? If you put those three things together, it has the potential to drive the flow of capital. So it has a role in controlling the firms that the banks and insurers both lend to and invest to. So it can, doesn't necessarily, but it can change the flow of capital, say, to renewables and away from oil and gas, et cetera, et cetera. It can drive the flow of capital into the necessary adaptation for future climate change. So that's the job, which hopefully explains why it's relevant. To explain a bit more why I'm here today, why I'm in Leeds. My background's a little bit unusual, perhaps, for a central banker. I have a PhD in climate science. I worked on sort of the MOC and the shutdown of the MOC at the National Oceanography Centre 20, 30 years ago. And I combine that with 15 years in investment banking, which probably is less attractive to people here today. But if you put those two things together, it does enable me to sort of bridge the gap between the two. And a big part of my job is linking the Bank of England with the academic research that's going on across all the related disciplines that inform sort of climate-related risk management. And when we talk about climate-related risk management, we're talking both about the physical climate change, but also the societal response, transition, driving the transition, sort of policy, changes in litigation, etc. So we look at all those risks. And off the back of that, I've spent the last, I think starting with the Centre of Greening Finance and Investment at the University of Oxford, to which I met Jason. And then we have a particularly sort of productive collaboration now with the University of Leeds, looking at particularly flood modelling at the moment in the UK. But I also work with a range of other universities, which sort of gives the idea of the sort of diversity of disciplines. So I work with Oxford more on the transition economic side and looking at agent-based models and how they can predict the way that the world economy might change. I work with the University of Cambridge Psychology Department, looking at the psychology behind decision-making around climate science and the sort of natural cognitive biases that exist in the human mind and the role that plays in how we respond to climate change. And I work with UCL on decision-making frameworks for deep uncertainty. So you put all those things together and you get the sort of idea of the scope of the work and hopefully why I'm here today. And I think, sort of echoing what Piers said earlier, there's a lot of knowledge that we already have, but it's not transmitting into the financial service sector and the decision making. So we don't have to reinvent everything. We just have to make sure that the knowledge across all the disciplines does flow through to decision makers in the financial services sector. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, David. Next up, we've got Pim Sullivan-Tellier. Hopefully I've pronounced that right. You're director of the UK Youth Climate Coalition. Tell us about what you do.
Of course. Hi, I'm Pim. I'm a climate campaigner a climate justice campaigner, more I would say. And I cover a lot of different topics. But the through line between all of it, and if you're in this room, I probably don't have to explain it to you, but it's about how do we make systems change digestible to the everyday person. When if you're in here, you probably know what I mean by systems change, but we can't fix the crisis with the same economic system that is based on colonialism, capitalism, now neoliberalism, to actually fix everything that's going on here. And the crisis is actually a human crisis, right? As much as graphs and data is very important to us, thank you, Piers. And coming from an environmental scientist background, I did data science and environmental science, so what took me in, but what keeps you sustained is the human stories. So what I work on now, largely through UK Youth Climate Coalition, we work on things from grassroots mobilization to international climate policy through the UNFCCC climate change negotiations, which I actually just came back from last week. But yeah, I mean, most of it is the fact that we wouldn't be here if, a lot of the climate change policies that we've seen is very human-driven as well. Like, for example, Piers, you were there in that room. Who knows what would have happened if we just drove it through data. And so all of these policies are very human-driven. And as much as the UNFCCC or countries would like to say that it's a party-driven process, it is actually very civil society-based. So things that came out of COP recently, such as the Belém Action Plan, or other policies such as the TAF, the transition away from fossil fuels, wouldn't happen if it weren't for civil society being there. So my role here, I guess, is bridging those interconnected sectors, generations, systems, to actually remind ourselves that, when a flood hits, your job doesn't matter, how much money you have doesn't matter, it's actually the community that is your lifeline. So yeah, that's basically all I work around, and it's a lot of different themes at the moment around both international policy, but then there's other climate education and urban greening projects as well that I'm working on.
Fantastic. I'm going to do a rapid fire question, but from everybody. We'll start, Piers, at that end. We'll work along. So what is the single biggest area of progress towards a resilient, low-carbon future for the world that you would highlight over the last 10 years? And I'm picking 10 years because of the anniversary, of course. And so if we each go through one, and let's try and all come up with a different one. So it becomes slightly more difficult as it gets down this end.
Okay, I'll go for the simple one. I'll go for the electric car.
Let's keep coming.
I would go for, this is a bit more conceptual, I'll try and be, just the linking of the climate crisis to the other crises, like polycrisis, as you say.
Okay, I'm going to go slightly close to Piers, but I'm going to go with the fall in the price of PV. Solar power.
Well, I'll build on that because I think it accommodates both Piers and actually all of these points. The biggest single thing that is occurring as we speak, actually, is the huge shift that we're seeing in energy systems in Asia. And we in the West have not noticed it. So they will quickly move ahead of us, I suspect, in the benefits of having those systems. And it is in the last 10 years that you've seen that rate of change explode.
I was going to say what Pim said, and the increasing recognition that you can't tackle climate change if you don't address the other crises, like the environmental crisis and the pollution crisis. But as I can't do that, I'm surprised that no one said the fact that everyone is committed to net zero. That's an amazing achievement, as Piers noted in his speech, to be fair. But I think that's a really good thing to build on in the next 10 years.
Brilliant answers, and I must admit, I thought I'll do one at the end, and I was going to pick the one you've just picked, so that's kind of thrown me. What would I pick? I would also add there seems to be a realization of what I guess academically we'd think of as co-benefits, but that people just recognize that climate action is action for so many other things, whether it's thinking about food security, energy security, personal well-being. So I would add that to it. Right. Time for a question from the audience. Who'd like to ask the first question? Do we have a hand going up? Right, let's go here in the third row. Microphone coming.
Hi, Anzia Bodu from Climate Action Leeds. So we talk about having this sort of consensus, but we're also mentioning this sort of consensus over that we need to do something and we need to kind of come together is breaking down. So I feel that we're in this kind of weird situation where people are recognizing that something's happening, but potentially finding excuses to bury their heads under the sand. I don't know. So I was wondering what you all thought about how we get over this crisis, even if you even think that there is one, of the consensus that we need to do something about climate change breaking down. Because if 83%, I think, of the British public say that we need to take climate action, how many of them are actually taking climate action?
Who wants to have the first go? David, your hand went up so quickly. Libby, you can come in as a second on this one.
I do agree. I mean, otherwise there's a bit of a negative here that some things are going in the wrong direction. And if you look at what I said earlier about joining up the disciplines, those that don't want to act take advantage of inconsistencies in the message. And so particularly in my sphere, the academic world of climate science and the academic world of economics hasn't traditionally joined up very well. And as a result of that, you get the belief in, so to say, non-technical expert policymakers that climate change is not as big a problem as climate science makes out, almost, because of the weaknesses in the economic models that have shown very low impacts. But those models have severe limitations that just fail to capture the non-linearities associated with climate science. So I think the answer is to educate and speak the same language, and sort of, I think very much in the sort of the idea of the Priestley Centre, in sort of transdisciplinary research that brings everybody together, that means there aren't these gaps to be exploited by those that want to take the easy route of doing nothing.
I think that the biggest breakdown in consensus isn't amongst the public, though. I think it's more of a breakdown of political consensus, which doesn't reflect the enduring desire of the public for people to take action, for the governments to act and for businesses to act. I think we've done plenty of research that looks at who people think are responsible, and in general there's a lot of consensus that everyone is responsible, but people most want to see businesses and politicians act so that it will make things as easy as possible for them to do. And so I think that the real rebuilding of consensus has to be done at a political level to reflect what the people want to see. And I think that is going to be a challenge, not least because the sort of attack on the term net zero, and I think one thing that we could stop doing is stop talking about net zero and talk instead about climate change. But attacks on climate change and on people like Ed Miliband in the press are incredibly high, and they don't represent how the public feels. So I think that there is a lot to do to counter that, which should involve things like telling the good stories, telling the scary stories, but also the good stories about what's going on in communities and the co-benefits and the reasons that we need to do this. And to point out to the people in power how popular it still is with the public. We've recently done some polling specifically on reuse, repair, and sharing, and how different voter types feel about it. And it is very popular with the reform curious Labour voters. One of the statistics that surprised me most is we asked them about a target to keep resource use within planetary boundaries, which is quite radical, and no one has a statutory target like that. And reform voters were in favour. I think about 60%, and most of the rest of the public were far ahead of them. So I think those are statistics, but getting those statistics to mean something to the people in charge so that they do something about it would be good.
I'm going to take a next question, and then we'll take that one to Pim and Chris, I think, in the first instance, so we can get through some more. There's a lady on that side, about 3/4 of the way up.
Claire Townley. I'd like to ask the panel what you've done in your own lives to practice what you preach, basically. Thanks.
Chris, do you want to go first, and then Pim?
Yeah, I personally made quite a few changes to my life, and also lots of sacrifices, not least the fact that I've now worked in London for almost a decade and away from 2 young kids. But I've mainly changed transport, what I eat, and done as much as I can to a historic property. But the point I want to make actually is in response to that question, I'm going to link it to the last one. This idea that you have to have a purist test that we apply to people who work on this stuff is what will ultimately, I'm not suggesting you're saying this, by the way, but this is, I think, one of the big features of the debate at the moment, which you don't find from those on the other side of the debate. So maybe to answer that first question the same way, the way we'll get out of this is by accepting you don't always win all the time, right? So there's this story of progress is not going to be a straight line of always getting everything that we want. And we're definitely losing some of the arguments at the moment. I don't think there's any question about that. And the way it's framed doesn't help. And net zero as a term has definitely changed in its popularity. But it struck me a lot, particularly in the last sort of 6 or 7 years of working on this, that we often expect the people who advocate for it to be perfect, whereas the people who advocate against it don't apply any such test to it. And I'll tell you there's a recent experience. I'm on the board of a charity who works in the arts on climate. And the guy who runs it runs a record label. He's a very cool guy. He said, "Oh, you should get Jeremy Clarkson." He said, "He should come out and help you out." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, this is the problem with you guys." He said, mostly what he says, 70% of what he says you agree with, but the 30% puts you off. And he said that is what's going to cause you the biggest problems. And I think there's some truth in that. So we need to learn to be nuanced and to accept that not everything is going to be agreed with by absolutely everyone. And I think the whole story of this is actually one of a lot of progress towards the goals that we need to see. Obviously not enough, but we will make that progress if we're a bit more accepting of the fact that we all live in a system, of course, that means that we can't be perfect. So I've personally taken a lot of public criticism, not least because of the jobs I did, because I am not perfect. I have a gas boiler, which I'm very unhappy with, but I have to have because of the rules that apply to the house that I live in. And the fact that the Sun newspaper took photos of it and ran it on the second page makes me quite anxious, actually, if I'm honest about it. But that you've just got to roll with it, I think, is the answer. So we will keep making progress on this if we're able to roll with the punches a bit more.
Pim, do you want to go to this one too?
Yeah, I can definitely add on to that. I totally agree with what's just been said. And I think, of course, personally made a lot of changes, particularly with transport and like fast fashion and things like that. But again, I think there's a quote that really encompasses this from Clover Hogan, the founder of Force of Nature, which is one of the organizations I work with, is that we need 100 imperfect activists, not one perfect one. Even the concept of the carbon footprint was created by BP to put responsibility on us as individuals, rather than actually look at the system as a whole and realize where we need to be putting our energy towards. So yeah, I just want to reiterate that on, there's no possible way that we can be perfect, but we can do what we can try to do best, and also be, again, very nuanced about it. Not everyone has the access to be able to be perfect, whether it's because of food insecurity, whether you're in the UK or whether you're in a global south country, that you actually are not able to be part of the energy transition. Like, there's a lot of nuance to that, but I think part of that conversation is we need to be open to having those uncomfortable conversations, which is really important, because if we're not having those uncomfortable conversations, we're not really questioning the status quo.
Brilliant. I'm going to squeeze in another question now. So when we think about the pathway towards solutions, probably it's going to involve some government action, probably it's going to involve some private sector action, probably it's going to involve some third sector action, and a lot of individual responsibility and a lot of individual action. Libby and Chris, I think this one. How do we increase the rate of progress with each of those actors?
I think at the moment a lot of people in the third sector are really quite concerned about not increasing the rate of progress, but stopping any backsliding, which I think reflects what Chris was saying, is that we're not going to go in a straight line. We've got the ZEV mandate. We thought that was done. You have to defend it on a yearly basis. Once a year, you have to redefend it, it seems. So I think you need to have a recognition that just because something goes wrong doesn't mean it will always go wrong, and you might have to redo some fights. But I do think that building up the case, particularly from the public, is going to be increasingly important, because I think one of the reasons that we've made so much progress so quickly is because we have had low-hanging fruit. We have had, I know that the energy system is a challenge to change, but in terms of the system, that is one of the easier aspects to tackle in the first instance, and then the behavioural change is going to be harder, the things that involve communities and people. And so we are going to have to get much better at talking to people about what their needs are, at figuring out how we can mitigate any negative impacts that might come about because of policies, because people might be right to think that they're going to be slightly worse off in certain situations because of actions that we're taking. So we need to get more into the nuance of it and figure out how to tell the right stories and make the right progress whilst still defending the things that we've done already.
I really agree with that, Libby. And my recent experience tells me that if you pick an ambitious goal and then organise things around it, it's possible to make rapid progress. So we picked a goal deliberately for 2030 in the knowledge that you probably only, I was saying this to Jason before it began, you probably only get 2 or 3 years. Any one minister probably on average gets lucky, if they're lucky, if they get 3 years to do anything. And the 2030 framing was deliberate. So the idea that you wanted to focus on changing something by 2030, and that's been what I've been working on is the power system. So if you want to change something, it's largely about getting new infrastructure built. And if you don't do that in the first half of a parliament, then you lose your influence over it altogether in the second half. So we've, I think, demonstrated you can do something like that. So in terms of maintaining the rate of progress, it's about picking your battles well, actually. I think if it's inevitable that won't continue to be the focus, the only focus as we go into the second half of a parliament and as we face into a new form of government with a new prime minister. So pick the next battle. And the kind of key thing for me is that people pick up on that. Like, so you may be dead against what we've done to 2030, and there are lots of people who would say that. But they're often the same people who would say, I don't see this government doing anything. And when you see change happening, there's a sort of, it starts to overcome some of the cynicism about what government can do as a coordinator of the private sector, the people, the third sector. So I think if we keep this sort of rolling boil of things that we keep focusing on and showing that we can deliver, then I think government can play a role. I think I say government deliberately can play this role as an actor of bringing that together and showing that things can be done. And we haven't had that for a while. So picking the right battles so that you can show quick progress towards a longer term goal, I think that's the secret. but also accepting that when things don't go well, and that definitely happens, that you can move off it and roll off it onto the next thing. So we've got to be better, I think, at taking the knocks, as I talked about them earlier, and keep this story going of things continuing to improve over time. And it's with that momentum that we'll get much more quickly down that path that Piers showed earlier, and onto some of the, I think, the harder things that we haven't talked about so much, about the resilience of our systems, about how well adapted they are to that change in the climate that is now upon us. These are things that are not in the public discourse at the moment, but every time we have a heat wave, they do come into the discourse. We've got to keep showing the people that we're reacting to those as well. So it's about, I think, momentum, positive progress, even if it's not perfect. I think that is what people want to see, actually, regardless of their view about climate change.
No, really interesting. Actually, we did a survey quite recently of homeowners, and we had a storyline that was very high temperature, storyline that was flooding. I was surprised at how strong the awareness was of climate events and the link through to having known somebody who's experienced extreme weather. But one of the big barriers that was holding people back is simply not knowing what to do, and who to trust for that advice as well really stood out for me. David, if we come at this from the finance sector, what role can the finance sector play in accelerating our pathway towards this resilient, low-carbon future?
I mean, I think obviously it has the ability to drive capital into the investments that are required to reduce carbon outputs, to adapt as well. But how much can you expect of the financial services sector? I mean, it is designed to efficiently allocate capital with a relatively short time horizon, and that does produce problems. And so it is tending to react to short-term policy measures. I think it's fair to say that we have seen things go backwards a little bit recently. We've seen the collapse of a lot of the net zero alliances around the world in the sort of financial services sector, which to me personally wasn't a great surprise from what we'd seen from the behaviour. It always felt like a herd management, a reputational risk rather than a true commitment. So, you know, how can we influence the financial services sector? We can do it through government, we can do it through central banking regulation, although my seniors would argue that that's not the most effective place to do it. I think what we can also do with the financial service sector is, as individuals, we can also influence the financial services sector. As shareholders through our pensions, we can vote, we can move our investments. Even in retail account holders, we can move between banks. And I think that, you know, banks and insurers will react to that sort of thing. So I think, you know, the public needs to show that we all want to deal with climate change, and we can make our financial services sector reflect what we want to happen.
Brilliant. So now if we think about the next generation, how do we equip them to play a part in this role? And I asked very specifically because before I travelled up last night, I asked my 15-year-old daughter what question I should ask. And that, of course, was her question.
Yeah, of course. I think there's, well, to start, just as a base, you know, the way that climate education is currently in the country is maybe, it definitely is not as interdisciplinary as it should be. The Department for Education has recently put in the natural history GCSE and has all these plans. While it's actually great for the physical infrastructure of the schools, it's still not embedded in all curriculum, which is one thing which I think is really important to be able to equip future generations, is just to have that baseline level of education that it is linked into everything. And the next thing I think is that as young people, there is a general lack of faith in current political authority. And I think now it's changed a little bit in terms of the municipality level. We've got, you know, like really great deputy mayors like Mette Colban in London. I just say London because I'm based in London, but there's like other mayoral levels that are really great. But if we're talking at a national level, there's a real lack of trust. So I think that then causes a huge level of eco-anxiety. And there was a study done across 52 countries that at least 70% of young people felt hopeless about the future. But I think what actually we can do for young people is to be able to give them both resources kind of within a community, but financial resources as well, to come up with solutions, because the way that we can tackle anger, the way that we can tackle despair is through actually building action and agency through that, and for them to give them a channel to both come up with solutions but make mistakes on the way as well. That's an important part of learning and becoming a change maker, as they say. I think I don't like the word change maker. I think anyone can, you can just be an active citizen and that's enough. But I think really tackling that, it's okay to feel despair and anger, but those aren't the things that sustain us. The things that sustain us is joy and hope, as much as it sounds a little woo-woo, but it's true. So, yeah.
Piers, from the perspective of climate science, if you could advance one area of the science over the next 4 or 5 years, what would you push more than anything else?
I do think we have to really bring it far closer term and closer to home. And I sort of think we do have to embed it in the day-to-day life that people understand. So when we talk about the risk to people, it's their risk to their finances, their risk to their health, their risk to their homes. So I think we can do a better job at that translation, and we get really bogged down in uncertainty and things in a terrible way. And the other thing, and I think we see it today, that we don't tie the events of the heat wave to what we can do about it. I mean, there is so much we can do. The people say, this is the new kind of normal, but it doesn't have to be that. We can put air conditioning in our schools so our kids can stay at school and can learn about this stuff. Or we can put it in our kind of hospitals so people don't die. So there is stuff we can do today as well. So I sort of think we have to combine it with the action, and we have to not have this distant thing we talk about. We have to really bring it to what we can do for this institution as well and for ourselves.
It's a good answer. It feels like we've had a lot going across here in terms of how we progress. To finish it off, though, I think it's always good to finish with the audience. So I'm going to ask for, there's a hand going up here, the lady 2/3 of the way up.
Thank you. Jemima Parker from Zero Carbon Harrogate, just up the road. And obviously I'm speaking from one of those granular community groups trying to affect change on the ground. My question was around climate justice and a just transition. Because this is something that's really challenging for us locally. And I wondered whether the desire for a just transition is actually holding back the release of private capital to drive a rapid transition. And I should perhaps just explain that as a local community action group, we really struggle to find funding to affect behavioural change with the people who have funds, who are actually creating most of the carbon emissions. Most of the funding is only available for working with those with really low incomes who are not the problem.
Okay, we're going to do a quick response, I think, to this, just to fit it in, and then we'll wrap up. Who wants to take a go at that one.
I don't know if I can do it quickly, but I don't think we should stop focusing on a just transition. I think there are several different layers of just transition globally and also locally. I think something that I am quite concerned about, which I would like to see a lot more of, is actually more of a, and there are some academics, there's Tony Juniper, some people have done this, looked at the ways that inequality is actually driving climate change, so kind of to flip it around, so you're not looking to the people who aren't causing it, but figuring out how a more equal society could be also one that is lower carbon, because the evidence that is out there suggests that those societies that are less equal have much higher carbon and much higher rates of consumption. And so I was intrigued yesterday when Andy Burnham said he was going to end the trickle-down system, because trickle-down economics hasn't worked, I think we can say, but trickle-down consumption, which is what's driving climate change, has definitely been embedded. So I think a focus on tackling those problems together is more important than ever. And I do appreciate that funding is hard. I think funding is hard at the moment for all environmental groups that I've spoken to. But I probably wouldn't look to the big businesses that are benefiting from the current system, but there are lots of new trusts that are getting into the space, like National Lottery and Nuffield are doing things.
Pim, do you want to have a last go at this one, and then I think we'll finish?
I'll try and keep it short, because I think you said a lot of what I was going to say, but I think it's more to do with the current funding environment, I think, than the fact that, a just transition is key to make sure that we don't have to then solve and undo all the things if we try and do a rapid transition. So I think it's just the way that the current funding environment is going, and it's affecting both NGOs and small community groups to, the climate policy at the top levels of international governance that we've seen. So I think it's a general shift that the funding environment has currently had. And so I think it's just a narrative change that we just need to keep pushing for. And there are funders that are very open to those conversations, and the more traditional funders, let's say, who look towards mitigate. A lot of the climate funds go to mitigation projects rather than kind of narrative change or adaptation projects. So I think it's having those conversations and fitting it within what currently the environment is. But I feel your struggle.
Okay, I think I'm being signalled we're probably at the end of our time. Please join me in thanking what has been a fantastic panel. Thank you.
Cool. You can't go quite, or you guys can go if you want to, or stay up here if you want to as well. You can stay there. You look quite comfortable. You can't go quite yet, everyone, because we have to celebrate stuff now too. I mean, we're really about driving impact, and Piers other Piers, far more famous than this Piers, was an astronaut that really passionate about the world and understanding climate science, but also passionate about what we can do to save it, and this prize is in his honour. We have 2 prizes to give. The first one is for exceptional PhD, I've got to get my notes from me. The first exceptional PhD research, and who are you going to go to? Well, let's see. It's going to go to Elliot Johnson and Alice Quito. Stay there. You're not going I'm going to tell you about Alice and Ellie's work for a minute, and then you can come and get the prize, Alex, okay? So what they've done to support the transition away from fossil fuel ambition from different countries, they have produced working in a very collaborative way with the Colombian government, in a very short space of time, they produced a fossil fuel phase-out roadmap for Colombia that did happen to look like a lot like one of our climate change committee reports by accident. And what it did so effectively was to really show the economic benefits for Colombia. And it was just about to be taken up and signed off by a whole group of cross-government ministers when they had a general election and quite a kind of right-wing candidate got in. So perhaps it won't work, but it is still sitting there within the government. So if they've got any sense about them, they will take it up again and they will deliver it. So you did great work. Alex is here to collect the prize. So come up, Alex. Thank you very much. Now have a picture taken. You hold it. Good job. Good job. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, okay. I just turn the page. I'm on the right one now. I often know this. I don't know all the words. There's a lot of words in this one. So the next prize is for research that does have a real impact on society, and this again is really exciting work that did have a big impact on the country. So I would like to announce the winners of this prize, and who will it be? It will be Ruth Bookbinder and Alex Herrisford. Well done, guys. But now, perhaps by design, this is about the just transition, and it's about just transition in South Africa, where a lot of coal mining work, I don't know how many, probably like 5 million or something, a huge population in the country do work in the coal industry. And just think of the fuss we get in this country from 20,000 workers in Aberdeen, and then think of trying to take coal out of the mix in South Africa and the issues for their country. And I get who you were for. You work with the Sam Dabini Research Institute, you work with the National Institute of Mine Workers, and you work with one of the great climate councils, the Presidential Climate Commission, who chair the commission. They're not a climate scientist like me, they're the president of the country. But this is one of the more effective governing way to drive change. And I think this really demonstrates my ideal way of working, guys. I mean, you're working really collaboratively in a very humble and joined up way with these institutions to really capacity build and empower them to really make effective decisions for themselves about the transition. So, I think you really exemplify fantastically exactly the sort of work we should be doing to change the world. So thanks very much, Alex, and Hughes, fantastic job, well done. Come on, fantastic. There we are. I don't know what you do. I get in the middle.
Yes.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Now, before we go, all of you have got a job to do too, okay? And this is about the next 10 years, okay? So I do think you should all have your name tags. There's a lot of blank white space on your tags, and what I want you to do is really write down what you're going to do or what you want us, doesn't matter, what you want to do or the way you want the world to change or something like that. Write it on the back of this, and what we're going to do, we're going to bury this in a time capsule. We're going to put it right at the back of a cupboard. The whole Priestley Centre doesn't have a lot of space, but we have this incredible, weird kind of cupboard. A lot of strange things in, and we don't ever touch for years and years. So you're going to go in the back of that for 10 years, and it will hopefully be discovered, and we will then find out if what you put in it did ever come true. Okay, guys, thanks very much. Now, please join us for a wonderful reception, but please take a look at the exhibition as well. There's lots of cool work. There's kind of soundscapes, the poetry, there's other things, which I can't, there's other great things too. I also know what they are, but go and have a look. They're great. Oh, there's artwork, Jamie McKay's artwork. Go and have a look at it, and please join us in the celebrations. Cheers, everyone. Thanks, Daniel.